look at how this works. It's a bit paradoxical because on the one hand, the wisdom and the insights tell us that all these attachments, they're all just illusory. Standard Buddhism, right? All these attachments to life are just illusory. Your attachments to money, to your children, to your family, all illusory. And is that true? Yes, of course it's true. From the absolute perspective, it's true. But at the same time, just to be able to teach that to people requires that one be alive. The Buddha can't teach you unless he has air in his lungs, food in his belly, and a comfortable place to sit. The Buddha can't teach you without food, water, air, a safe environment, a climate-controlled area where it's not too hot and not too cold. He can't teach you on the surface of the sun. He can't teach you in the middle of a desert where you're dying of thirst. So very narrow conditions are required for survival and for the propagation of spiritual teachings and work, or any kind of life for that matter. This is obvious stuff, but it's worth thinking about in this context. So, for example, for me to teach the things I want to teach, I have to be concerned by very petty, mundane issues that most people would think, well, Leo, surely you should be above this. Like, Leo, you're so awake and so forth, you should be above concerns for money. But no, see, if I was above concerns for money, I would literally not care about money. And if I literally didn't care about money, then I wouldn't even check my bank account. And if I didn't check my bank account, it would run out eventually. And once it ran out, my electricity would shut off, my cable would shut off, I wouldn't be able to power this camera that I'm recording this video on, and I wouldn't be able to upload it anywhere. You see how that works? So it's actually perfectly okay for me not to care about money, but then there are consequences. The mistake that naive people make is they think like, oh, well, it's all just sort of a dream, and I could just like stop caring about these things, and everything will just be okay. Like God will guide me through life. Not so fast. What kind of life do you want? God is not something above you that is guiding you through your life. This is God. Your thought process itself is God. So when you think to yourself, shit, I got to put more money in my bank account so I can pay today's electricity bill so that my electricity is not shut off so that I can do my work tomorrow. When you think that, that is God doing its work. That's how God works. That's not the only way God works, but people overlook that that is how God works. God works not just in supernatural ways. God works in very practical ways. In fact, mostly that's what's happening in your life. So if you care about your children not suffering, see, maybe you're above suffering. And you might say, oh, Leo, I've become so enlightened that I'm not even worried about suffering anymore. Okay, but you have children. Are they as enlightened as you? Do you care about their suffering? Now, maybe you say, Leo, I'm so enlightened that I don't even care about their suffering. Okay. And that's possible. That is perhaps a valid state of consciousness you could one day reach. Although I highly doubt any of you have reached it. But let's say you've reached that point. Okay, fine. But then your children will suffer and die. Are you okay with that? Now, if you say yes, then what's the problem? Well, technically there is no problem. But the problem is that you're not going to be okay with it. See, you fool yourself telling yourself that you'll be okay with it, but actually you won't be. So that's where you have to be very careful. So what you have to understand is that ideas inherently are dangerous things. We tend to treat ideas as mere philosophy, some sort of armchair stuff that we do. And frankly, a lot of what you see on YouTube in terms of the sort of idea sphere on YouTube is that. It is just armchair philosophy. It's ideas that have little real-world consequences. But even in those areas, it's still not true. I mean, look at what's going on in our culture and our society, for example, with ideas within politics. There are dangerous ideas within politics, both on the left and the right. Now, I would say that there are more on the right than there are on the left. But hey, you could say that I'm biased. Whatever. But you can certainly find some very dangerous ideas, for example, if you wanted to, on the radical right. And that's not to pick on the right-wingers, but just like, honestly, there are some really toxic and dangerous ideas and ideologies floating around within conservative circles, the extremes of conservative circles. Nationalism, racism, xenophobia, people who want to start an ethno-state, people who are happy with ethnic cleansing, and they spread these ideas online, and they gain traction. There's sort of a battle over these ideas going on recently in the last 5 years online. That is not to pick on right-wingers here. That is just to point out that ideas can be dangerous. And this has always been the case throughout human history. We tend to have reached this very point of luxury today in first world democracies, where we tend to consider free speech as the highest goal and right, and that, you know, everything is okay with free speech. Free speech makes everything good. But it was never that way. Never. To get to this point, human civilization had to be built on deep restrictions on speech and on ideas, because some ideas are corrosive to the very fabric of society, and they're threatening to social hierarchies and to the economy and other such things. For example, an idea like that the dollar is imaginary. Seems like an innocent idea, right? It seems, in fact, so obvious that the dollar is imaginary. I mean, if you corner anybody with this question, they will admit to you that the dollar is, of course, imaginary. We imagine its value. And the only reason it has value is because we collectively agree that it has value and that we're going to use it. But if, for example, one keeps questioning the idea of a dollar more and more and more and more until literally everybody in the world stops believing in the dollar, that can crash the entire economy. That's the power of one idea. And spiritual ideas are a special class of ideas which are the trickiest in a sense. They're the trickiest precisely because, as we've talked about in the past a lot of times, the human psyche, all that it's doing as part of its survival function is that it is constructing various worldviews and perspectives and ideologies, taking on various beliefs, and it's using these to navigate its way in the world. That those ideas shape how you see reality and how you interact with people, animals, things, family members, how you view your life, whether you even believe your life is worth living. This is all based upon ideas. As soon as you get the idea that your life is no longer worth living, that's the doorway for you to suicide. And 40,000 people in America do that every year. So ideas are very, very powerful, especially your ideas about yourself, and especially your ideas about the structure of reality. And so the problem, though, is that when you start to get closer to truth by deconstructing various fantasies and illusions and ideas, what happens is that the ego gets very threatened. And so there's pressure put upon the ego the closer it gets to truth to squirm away and to come up with some sort of fantasy or illusion or deception to, again, cloak itself in more ideas. That's what the mind is doing. That's how the mind survives. And it had to be this way for you to be sitting here listening to me. Otherwise, you'd be dead. And I'd be dead. If you and I and our ancestors for the last 100 generations were not like this. So we're all like this. Nobody is immune to this. So the problem fundamentally is this: how do you teach deep truths about spirituality without people misconstruing it or weaponizing it or demonizing it or going into ideology, belief, worship, messiah complexes, spiritual ego, and taking it too far in that direction, because there's a problem with both sides. On this side, you have extreme skepticism and cynicism and sort of demonization. So these are sort of like the people who don't like the ideas at all to begin with. Their minds are so closed that they just find any excuse imaginable to attack the ideas as false. They smear, they demonize, whatever. They can even do violence. That's sort of the skeptical end of the spectrum. And a lot of times, the most skeptical people of spiritual ideas are the scientific and the atheistic and the rationalist people. So you create enemies out of them when you teach this stuff. But then there is the other end of the spectrum, which is people who love the ideas so much, they get so enamored with the ideas that they stop thinking critically. They lose common sense, and they start to turn it into an ideology, and they become cult-like about it. They start to worship the teacher or the guru. They hang on every word. And then from that, all sorts of problems can happen.